Hi everyone, this is Clint from Game U, and next to me is Julie and Elise. We are part of the Game U Behavioral Workshops, and today we are actually going to be answering the Q&A questions that you've posted throughout the past few weeks. Hopefully you posted something. If not, don't be too shy. Sorry. But we actually are going to reopen the questions later today for anyone else, right?
Hi everyone,
Yes.
this is Clint from Game U.
Hello. Well, anyways, sit back, enjoy the show. If you have any questions, it's a show. If you have any questions, by all means, please let us know right now so that we have more than enough time to ask them and answer them, hopefully. Okay?
And how are they going to ask the question?
Through the chat, through the YouTube chat. And also, everyone in the chat right now, let us know that you're in the chat if you haven't already, just so that we know that you're here. And also be talkative throughout the actual event, just so that we know that you're constantly active and not just doing whatever. All right. Well, besides that, take care and yeah, enjoy.
Okay. Do you want to let us know that people have checked in, or have people checked in enough to hear us?
We have a good number of people.
All right. Is Andrew B on here? Okay. This first question is from you. I'm going to read the question just for whomever is there and doesn't have a copy of this. The question that came from Andrew was, oftentimes with students, I tend to praise the small or basic tasks students accomplish, like using the mouse correctly or typing and spelling a word correctly. Some students are at Game U pursuing professional careers. Although their work is impressive, considering their ability, it may not be up to professional standards, particularly in subjective fields like art. What are some ways instructors can give constructive criticism without discouraging the student? Sorry, there was somebody in my paragraph. Without discouraging the student. What if the student is convinced their work or artwork is up to standard when it's not? Great question, Andrew. So Elise and I looked at this, and we thought that a really good idea would be to create a rubric. If you don't know what that is, a rubric is a way that a student can monitor or evaluate their own work based on expectations that you create. So there might be a checklist of qualifications or requirements for a project that you would consider impressive or professional, and that student could have a written copy of the rubric, and they'd be able to see, well, I've included 3 out of the 4 professional qualifications. This must be adequate, and that takes you as the instructor out of the equation so that the student doesn't feel as though you're criticizing them. It's coming from you. It's actually, this was created based on what is professional and up to the standard in the industry.
Another piece of a rubric is that it evaluates based on a scale, like a 1, 2, and a 3, let's say. So if a student only has pieces of a skill or a target, maybe they only get a 1. And then when they improve, they can get a 2. And then, so the more complex that specific task is that you're looking at, or that specific skill, you'll have more qualities or more characteristics that that student is actually looking for in his or her own work. Because the goal is to get obviously as many points or like the higher level in that rubric. So they're able to see, well, I only got a 2 this time, so in order to get a 3 to be at the level I really want to be at, I need to add these things, or I need to do these things. And you could really break down any skill into a number of different qualifying tasks and then just grade them. Another piece that Julie mentions is it takes you out of it, and the student is comparing his own work basically to a very objective score sheet. But it gives you an opportunity to kind of say, well, where's the evidence? Show me that you're at a 2 or at a 3. So that they can prove to you, like, yeah, I really did all this. I have all of this. So they're not just saying, yeah, I'm up to speed. I'm doing everything I need to do. They have to show you the proof. So although you're out of the grading system, you're still a part of that like checks system.
Kind of third-person perspective, which is nice. Did that answer your question? Does that make sense, Andrew?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. This is from Matthew Deaton, in case there's more than one Matthew. Are you out there, Matthew? Oh, good. Hi. So
I'm so surprised.
no, I just
That's
wanted to make sure
great.
that I'm talking right to you. So your question, and for everybody else who doesn't know, I
This
have
was a hard one.
yes,
I
this
think.
was a hard one. I have a student who is an amateur filmmaker, and he has a good deal of talent. However, he's mostly interested in cheap, exploitative horror films, and it causes his works to have strange, misogynistic undertones. He often uses footage of women from movies and stock footage of models in underwear, and he puts them in situations where they are usually chasing or pining after him. Thank you. Causing him causing him to be annoyed and run away or call them illicit names. He seems to love the dynamic of Meg Griffin from Family Guy, who is verbally abused by those around her. And he paraphrases moments with the character in his movies. My student is actually a nice guy, and he's well-meaning, but he doesn't seem to realize the implications of the films he makes. Where is the line between offering advice as a teacher or mentor and criticizing a student's tastes? Am I crossing a line if I tell a student that his movies would probably be better if he looked to some more wholesome influences? So we thought about this one. This was a challenging
we talked
response.
about this for
yes.
actually quite a while. I mean, to start with, I don't think it's necessarily our job to tell a student.
Meaning your job.
Yeah, your job. What he should or should not be doing. So if it's his area of interest, then I don't necessarily think that we should be telling him that no, you shouldn't be doing that. However, in a professional environment that is Game U, so not any other professional environment, what he is creating may not be appropriate within the dynamic of Game U. And I think that's more where the intervention is necessary. He may work in another professional environment where creating films and videos like that is totally appropriate. So I think it's just teaching what is okay in this professional environment.
And we thought maybe his parents or whoever he is close with and outside of here might be able to help him research some of those viable options for him to share his films. But we need to be able to come up with something as a replacement that he can do here at Game U.
Right. And we did talk about the whole idea of like a damsel in distress and, heroes and how that is a part of, video games and films, and you see that all the time. So is there a way for him to incorporate that and maybe tone it down a little bit to make it more professional for this environment? And if not, then maybe there has to be another avenue for filmmaking within Game U, and then what he wants to create gets created elsewhere. So hope that was helpful.
Is he saying anything?
I'm sure he will respond once the
Okay,
video
so
comes.
just let us know.
Well, we have another question from Matthew too.
He asked another one. I have another student who occasionally likes to casually dismiss instruction. It's not like he tends to reject any suggestion or do anything reminiscent of oppositional defiant disorder. He's just occasionally saying, nah, I'm not doing it that way, as if it was the natural flow of conversation. It's usually over small things like which direction to rotate a ramp or what number to type for movement speed, nothing that would change the lesson. How do I maintain my authority as instructor without making the student feel as though they are being needlessly controlled? I'm just rereading our response because it's been a while since we typed this. So we wrote is whether or not is this an instruction or a choice? Like, what are the things that you're telling him to do? Are they things that he can have a choice with? And if so, present it that way. Present it as a choice, not as just an instruction, just to idly give an instruction because you're the instructor. We wondered whether or not you're still able to give directions that the student can follow, that are meaningful directions that would change the lesson. Because you said that he that it's not necessarily that what he wants to do will change the lesson, so it doesn't seem as though it's that big a deal, and wondered whether or not there are directions that you need to give that would actually change the course of the lesson
If
that
you
he
choose
needs.
not to
Yes,
follow it, right?
absolutely.
I think it doesn't necessarily matter how he protests or refuses. Yeah, I think it's somewhat nice that he's fairly casual about it. We've seen protesting in all sorts of other ways that are not as easy to recover from. However, a protest is a protest. So, depending on the student, like you don't necessarily want to reinforce a protest by if I say like you're going to what is like a number, what did you write a number to type for movement? Like if I say you're going to type 4 and he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And he types something else. Well, I've now just reinforced that protest and I've taken away any instructional control that I may have that, like Julie said, at some point, I might give a direction that he really needs to follow because it's going to change the course of the lesson or the course of what your student's going to produce. With that in mind, the best thing to do is always go back and redeliver your choices. Like, this is what I told you to do. This is basically the consequence of what happens when you do what I'm telling you to do, or this is the consequence of when you don't do what I'm going to do. And the consequence of that might be where this is the end of the lesson and we're going to move on to something else. And that could be a natural consequence too, if what he's doing, he's enjoying. But I would just caution you that no matter what that protest looks like, it's definitely something we don't want to just kind of ignore. We have a lot of students that we always call like the negotiators. Like you say, here's choice A, here's choice B, and they always come up with choice C. We really want to make sure we're not reinforcing that behavior because it's not tolerated in the workplace. I mean, you can't say to your boss like, nope, sorry, I don't feel like that today. It doesn't happen in real life. So we want to make sure that our students aren't learning those types of behaviors.
Okay. Are we good to move on?
One of the things that Russell said, kind of in response to this, he said, I have this problem with a few students. I let them break the game by doing it their way so they can personally see why you shouldn't do that. So
it's like a natural consequence if they
Right,
realize what they've done doesn't
Yeah,
work.
I think for some students that might be
That's
really,
necessary.
really helpful. For other students, you might hit a frustration threshold. Then when the game's not working, they don't know what to do or where to backstep. So again, I think it's really important to know your kids, and if that works for your students, yeah, absolutely be like, okay, try it, and when it doesn't work, it teaches problem solving at the
Absolutely.
same time, which is nice. I mean, because the other thing is, you don't want to say to a student like, if you just did it my way the first time, it would have been
Right.
right. We don't want
It's a learning process.
right. You know, you don't want it to be like, well, I told you to do that. So you'd like them to kind of figure some things out on their own as well. Oh, look, we have a
Visit-
guest.
Sorry, I'm late in my class.
So, should we move on to Daniel Weber's question? Is there, okay, great. So Daniel Weber asks, is Daniel here with us?
I believe he's actually going to be here at 8. He has a class till.
Maybe we can wait for his,
You want to skip it?
we can wait for
Okay.
him.
What
He's-
about Jessica Sullivan? Is she around?
she is here.
Hi,
Great.
Jessica. Jessica and I had a chance to Slack, so hopefully
guys are
things are still going
besties
well. We're besties, yes. Hi, Jessica. So I'll read what Jessica asked, and then we'll talk about how that has gone, and hopefully it's still going well. The answer to the question actually says reference the amazing Slack experience, so that's why we're laughing right now. So Jess says, I have a student, AJ, who is always in constant repetition. He will delete projects, then restart them over and over again. He also will repeat sitting in his chair, opening and closing doors. He does this until he is ready to move on to the next step. It makes completing things in class very difficult. I am wondering if there is any way to break him out of this cycle. So Jess also sent some video that I watched that showed her recreating what this student was doing because she didn't have any, real life work that he was doing, and basically he created something on the screen. I don't know technically what it's called, and then erased it, then recreated it, and erased it. And maybe the only thing that changed about the recreation was the color or the direction. I couldn't tell. It was like pyramids, or he was building something. So it was just constant back and forth and back and forth. And really that's all he wanted to do during the session. So I had suggested to Jessica, I asked if she had tried a visual/written schedule with him. I said this schedule could have tasks of your choosing, tasks like the one you recreated that he wants to do, alternating with other tasks that she wants him to do, each with a timer. This would allow for the breaks that you want him to take, which would essentially be a stop to his repetitive behavior. So I said this might also help to expand his repertoire of skills. So if he's only got the skill set to do what he's creating and recreating on the schedule where the activities are that she is asking him to do, she could start to teach him skills that will increase her repertoire. So she had responded that she did have a schedule, but it is not written. And she said that she will try that with the timer and see how it goes. She told me that the schedule worked really well, written out. She put it up on the TV for him to read, and I haven't heard anything else since. So Jess, I'm wondering whether or not it's still successful or needs a little tweaking. But putting him down in writing and having a timer so that if he did need some time to create, erase, it was on a very limited time schedule. And then the next thing on that visual schedule was something that she had instructional control over. And then that could alternate back and forth.
And I think Julie's making an important point that you might not be able to totally extinguish some levels of problem behavior throughout your session, and nor should that necessarily be your goal. So to give the student an outlet to have some time to engage in, repetitive play or whatever it is, and then go back to work, that could be a really even balance. And it doesn't necessarily have to be even in the sense where it's the same amount of time, but just the idea that you go from a work task to a preferred task, and work to preferred can do a lot for a student to get through a session.
And especially if it's some sort of obsessive compulsive behavior, if a student is able to see that even though I have to end it, it's coming back. I'm going to have a chance to do it again. I don't need to build this anxiety and stress level up, which could very well happen as well. I can see it's coming back. I need 10 minutes. It's coming back. The timer's going to go off. I'm going to be able to engage in that again. Chances are when he's alone anywhere, he's engaging in repetitive behavior that is not on a time schedule. So he gets a lot of access to it. So my guess is that this student is going to feel anxious if he thinks that it's being cut off. So the idea that he's able to see it's coming back, it's going to come back, I just need to do something else first, might help out with that.
Yeah.
Has Jess responded
She
about?
did. She said it's working really well. There is still some repeating happening, but we are getting a lot more done this way.
Awesome.
Great.
Good to hear. And that is why I said an amazing Slack experience. Reference it.
I'll put that on the shirt.
All right. So where are we? Dylan? Is Dylan here?
I believe he was.
Yes, I did see him on there.
Dylan, wave and say hi so I know you're still here.
Just give it a
Really,
minute.
huh?
I have another, I could I don't know, I think I could host
I
something.
can't. I was trying. Okay, keep going. You're hosting. The hostess with the mostest. Keep going.
If Dylan's not giving a high five, we'll go over to Zach Hajibi. Or Hajbi.
Zach did mention that he was having technical difficulties. Dylan
Okay.
did say he was here, so he most likely is still here. Zach
All right,
did
so
mention-
go back to Dylan.
Oh, Dylan's here. Yep.
Dylan.
Hi,
Hi, Dylan. Okay, so Dylan, I guess I'll read and you can.
That's fine.
Okay. So Dylan, says, I teach a student every other Saturday for 1 hour. He has extremely low energy and shows no apparent interest in anything I have exposed him to, even between small steps. I'll tell him to click something and he'll do it, then go back to put his hand on his head like someone who is bored. And when I tell him he has to click a second thing, it might take 2 tries before he zones out. I'll also tell him to use the mouse and he'll put his hands on the keyboard. I'll try to take a step back and ask him a question like, would you like to color the superhero? And he won't respond. instead holding his head down. I'll let him take a break to just play some Project Spark, and he will just completely stop in the middle of playing, turn away from the computer screen, and quietly look in another direction. How do I deal with a student like this who has no energy?
So I think there are a couple of things. One is I would wonder how you start your session with him, because maybe for a student like this, you have to start with something that's highly preferred in order to build momentum and then go into instruction. As far as like some of the things he knows and doesn't know, like does he know the difference between like a mouse and a keyboard and the screen? I mean, we kind of take that stuff for granted, but sometimes students don't respond reliably. So like every time you ask him to touch the keyboard, does he know it's the keyboard? Does he know what the mouse is? Or is he going to the keyboard because he doesn't want to use a mouse? So all of those things you might have to test out and figure out.
Because he might know technically, I need to put my hand here to make that move, but he may not have the label
Right, of what it is.
mouse, keyboard. He just
Yeah.
knows what he needs to touch. He may not have that label.
And then I'd wonder if there was a parent questionnaire, and did the student fill out, or did the parent fill out any student interests in that questionnaire? Because you're saying you've tried to expose him to a lot and nothing is clicking. So in that parent questionnaire, did they give any information that maybe you could pull from there? Because maybe we just didn't hit on the right thing yet, right? That happens too, that sometimes somewhere a parent gives us some information that we just didn't know yet. So I think those are the things, that's kind of where I would start. There are students who are just slow moving, right? They appear to be no energy and they are just slow moving kids. I would give processing time. So when you give a direction, give a few seconds before you go in and prompt or model something
Or ask another question.
And see what happens. But I think to start, I would think about building rapport and building momentum, and then definitely see what other interests the student might have. If the student is at all verbal and able to tell you, or has a communication device or anything, maybe ask them, like, what are things that they like to do outside of Game U? And maybe from that information, you can bring it into something that you do at Game U.
Matthew Dean actually responded with
Yeah.
his
Matthew Dean.
He
Top
said,
two.
I was actually able to get this student interested in virtual reality for the whole hour. Although I don't know if that will last once the novelty passes.
Which student is this? The
I
protesting?
think it's the same. No, it's the same student that Dylan's talking about because he said every other week. I believe.
Oh, okay. I was confused.
Oh, so he found something that was interesting to him, is what he's saying. Is what
Okay.
Matthew's saying about this
So,
student.
so you hit on another point there. Once the novelty, right, wears
Mhm.
off. So some of our students get really like
Satiated.
bored when the same thing is happening week to week. So you might have to do like virtual reality one week and then something else the next week, and kind of flip flop and revisit things, but not on a set schedule. And as you keep things fresh, you might find that attending and your what appears to be energy level changes. We have a lot of students who engage in basically different sorts of problem behavior when the same thing is presented over and over again. Even if that same thing is presented in a new way, it doesn't actually matter. So you might want to think about like if the virtual reality thing is exciting to him right now, don't overdo it, because
Right.
like Julie said, he'll get satiated and then you've lost it.
Some of that energy that goes into problem behavior when something novel is being presented, now that energy that they put towards problem behavior because they have nothing else to put it towards is now being put towards something novel. And when they don't need to be working so hard mentally to figure that out anymore, now they have that mental energy break time to go right back to the problem behavior or something else. So like Elise said, picking up something new on some sort of rotation, random, unexpected rotation is helpful. Okay, where did we leave
I
off?
think we're at Zach.
We said Zach was here?
Yes. Exactly.
Awesome. Hi, Zach.
Are you not going to answer the question if they weren't here?
No, I just wanted to know whether or not I was talking to them specifically.
Before we move on, Dylan
Ah.
did respond
Oh.
about he said, I have talked to the parents, and the only interests they have been able to give to me are Mario and Toy Story. And Mario Maker, which is specifically a Mario game, is also not exactly grabbing him too well. It's been very hard to build this relationship because I sometimes go 3 weeks without seeing him every time I feel like I have to start again.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I think because it's a sporadic time, I would say rapport building is going to be huge. So you might even want to start by like playing a game first, see if that helps, and then move from there to something that is actually like Game U curriculum. But yeah, if you're only seeing him like every few weeks, it is going to be like starting over every few weeks until he's been coming long enough where that has now become the routine.
So, without knowing technically a lot of things here, is it? I'm sorry.
Technically knowing anything.
Anything. I'm sorry. Is there a way? Is there a way that if he's away for 3 weeks, will he be engaging in anything at home that his parents could tell you, like, this has been interesting for the last 3 weeks for him? Can we try, something like that this week with you? They might have found a new interest over the past few weeks that you're not aware of, that maybe his parents or whoever drops him off could, I don't know if he brings something with him that he's been working on or with, or, I don't know whether.
I mean, there have been students who would, and this might just be a habit that they've built, but they would come in with like a handwritten letter saying like, hey, like, I was subbing for one student, and he was saying like, how are you doing? By the way, blah, 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 all this stuff. And today in class, I would like to do this. Maybe they could do
I
something
think that's
like
a great
that.
Yeah,
idea,
I think that's a
especially
great
with
idea.
3 weeks away. And this, Dylan not having that ability to have that ongoing conversation with him. 3 weeks is a really long time for a student, adult, to pick up another interest. I don't know how often he's exposed to something new outside of Game U, but he might pick up a new interest or see something. I mean, I'm sure they're doing some sort of video-based, gaming-based activity for 3 weeks straight, outside of Game U. There might be something that sparked an interest. So that might be a suggestion.
Okay.
All right, Zach, we're on you. Zach, I teach a student who is very much enthusiastic about coming to class. Oh, the opposite here. We always enjoy talking. He always enjoys talking to me, and he loves to make games and talk about games with me, and we have been together long. He does, however, have a habit of hitting with slaps on my leg or arm out of excitement. While I am not left in pain, it does leave me with a lack of comfort. So I frequently have to tell him to stop doing that, to which he often responds, but it's fun. And over time, I have managed to get him to decrease the frequency of it. I was wondering if there might be a better way to control the hitting. Well, one of the things that we had written down and thought about is your proximity, where you are in relationships to the student. I mean, it's easy for me to like slap Elise wherever I want to slap her, sitting over here. But if I were standing up as the instructor somewhere else, I could easily like move away or something like that. So it's something to think about, just where you are in proximity to the student and whether or not you can just put a hand up and, literally a hand up like this to stop it if you want. Another thing that can be done is to replace that hitting or slapping with something else. So if he's excited and happy and he can do a high five or something else that provides him the type of input that he might be seeking when he slaps you in fun on the leg or the arm, that might be nice too. So instead replace it with a high five or something else. You might also want to try to have whichever hand is closest to you when you're next to him, with something in it, whether it be like a squeezy ball or something that he could just occupy that hand with. That might also be helpful if it's not the dominant hand that he uses to control the computer mouse. Keyboard, I'm sorry.
I think also it's fun for him. It's not fun for you.
Or
right?
socially appropriate.
And I think that's a message that you can say to him, like that it's not fun for you when you're getting hit in the leg or the arm, And so that this is another way that would be fun for you. So I think that that's a totally socially appropriate message to send to him. And that it's really not okay whether you're getting hurt or not for anybody to hit you if you wish not to be hit. So I think that's an important. I think it's our duty to teach our students who don't necessarily have those social skills or that social awareness. It's on us to teach them these lessons. If he were to like get really excited outside of Game U, but like in a waiting room in one of the office spaces and hit somebody, somebody's calling the police, right? So if you try to if you really look at this on like a larger social scale than what's just happening between you and your student during class, I do think we're charged with a little bit more responsibility and make sure that our students are behaving in a way that is more socially appropriate.
Does that make sense, I hope, Zach? Awesome. Is Clint the last question?
Clint's the last question on here. So
Okay, I
we
just want to see whether or not
do we
anything
want to
else
talk
came up.
about that, Clint,
Sure,
what we
yeah.
talked about before?
Nobody has written any other questions.
There are 4 late questions.
Okay. So it's not, I don't think it's going to be on here
Oh, I thought this was the one. That
No, they're all in there.
It's all written through the.
Oh, I
because
see.
we had the problem
I
with it.
see, okay.
So Clint's question was about a student in New York who tends to leave early when another student shows up. And that second student, when he comes, is very loud and disruptive. So we just talked about ways that you can potentially alter the time of the class so that the students aren't in the same room together. And different ways to do that, obviously depending on your instructor schedule, potentially maybe having to change the day, not just the time that the students are there. Clint and I also talked earlier about the idea of headphones potentially to block out a very loud student, but that also comes with kind of a negative side effect that he may wear the headphones and then tune out everything the instructor is saying. So I guess I would take that recommendation as really a student dependent recommendation. Know your kid. Are they going to be able to still pay attention and listen to you with headphones on, or are they going to completely tune you out? Then it wouldn't be an option. And then again, because this other student who is coming in is fairly loud, do we take it upon us to kind of teach this student what is a socially appropriate volume level within an office experience? That's something we can potentially take on. And also give the student who's sensitive to the noise some kind of alert or transition time before the other student comes in. Sure. Anything else?
The only other thing that you and I discussed, and I don't know if it was discussed and just didn't, it wouldn't work
yeah.
out, is if there was the ability for the student.
I didn't say this, but yes, keep going.
Okay. What I think I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay. If there was an ability for the student that typically comes in second to already be there, right? Wasn't that the way we were going to work it out? When this other student who finds him to be disruptive comes later. So just to flip-flop their times slots and potentially start to pair these two students in a more positive way. So when this student that you're talking about comes in, to engage him and the disruptive student, the student that is loud, in some sort of reinforcing activity, something that they would both enjoy doing together. There's no pressure, there's no stress. It's just something fun, whether it be making putty it could be anything. I have no idea what it could be, but to engage them in some sort of really enjoyable activity for both of them.
So that
and then
they
they
could
can
pair.
Yeah, so they can enjoy each other, and then they can go off in their separate ways and still be able to be actively participating in their class time.
Cool. Sounds good.
Okay,
So
So
those
that-
were all the questions we had on our document.
correct. And you're saying that there are additional ones?
Yes. So Stephen kind of had a follow-up question to Zach's question about, I guess, his physical behavior. He said, this brings to mind a question about one of my students with similar behavior. Sometimes he will slap the table or brush the computer monitor with his hand. Not hard enough to do damage to equipment, but it is a little inappropriate. Usually near the beginning of a lesson, I think he might be coming in a bad mood. I usually try to cut the behavior by prompting him towards what we are working on, but I was wondering if there's a better way I can address this.
Redirection is a great way to address it.
Mhm.
And if redirection works and it doesn't continue to happen throughout the session, then redirection was successful. It might be that there's something anxiety provoking that
Upon entering.
upon entering, or when he first sits down at his workstation, that I guess it would take some investigation on figuring out what that is. You know, is it a matter of I've got to now figure out what I need to do? I don't know what the expectations are. Are there people around him that he finds anxiety provoking? Is he walking into a space that is crowded? Is he walking into a space that has weird smells? You know, like that you don't know. You know, whether or not there's something that's anxiety provoking, stress provoking that he's walking into. So it might take really being very observant to what that setting is for him when he first enters. And if redirection, is able to stop that behavior and doesn't increase, get worse, or continue on throughout the session, it might just be a matter of figuring out what's happening before that.
Yeah, and I even think before you can kind of like prep him, like, we're going to go in, I'm going to have you, let him know what's going to happen. Because if it is anxiety, somehow related to anxiety, then you can kind of prep him before he even gets to the table, and you might see a decrease there too. So remember, we're going to walk in, we're going to sit down, and I just want you to wait then until I get there. Remember to keep your hands, on the table or something like that with a clear direction that's incompatible with, did he say hitting the keyboard or whatever it was? So, I'd like you to keep your hands, in your lap until we're ready to start. That's a pretty clear direction,
It could really also be like a visual stereotypy kind of thing.
Sure.
Like if you think about swiping a keyboard and a screen, when I look at that, it feels good. There is some sort of sensory component
Could be
to,
visual, yeah.
There's some sort of visual, like it could be a lot of different things.
And if it is something like that, we're going to have to think of a replacement skill.
Right.
Because then there's going to have to be something else where he gets that feedback.
Like,
instead
does
of
he
from
do
the
it on
computer.
anything else? Is there anything
Yeah.
else you see him, swiping or rubbing up and feeling? I have no idea. Well,
He said that redirecting is not 100% success. It does work occasionally, but for the most part, I feel I need to give him his own time to cool off.
So maybe when he walks in, have him not sit next to the computer yet. Like, give him another place to like sit,
and chill.
and just say, okay, I'm going to give you a few minutes, and then we'll get started. Yeah.
When you're ready, let me, maybe it's
Yeah.
5 minutes and that's another place that maybe knowing via questionnaire what is relaxing and calming for this student,
Mhm.
having that available in a space next to him or, before he gets to the keyboard would be helpful, because we don't know at any given moment what's stressful for students, and having those options available at any given point, because maybe that stress happens midway through the session. I think it's a really good idea, and this is overall for all instructors who have that questionnaire filled out. I think it would be really important to look at that and to see what types of things are calming to the students they're working with, and have things like that available
Yeah.
somewhere in the center, in the workspace. So if in fact there does need to be any kind of de-escalation, whether it be something as simple as, pounding on the table and the keyboard, to getting up and being physical, if we know ahead of time that there are things that have been identified by caregivers, by students that are calming, then we should have those things available.
Yeah. I think also I'd be interested to know, like, how does he get to GameU, what time of day, what happens prior to him getting there, because there might be a breakdown before he's even getting here, which is why you're seeing some
Mhm.
level of agitation. So is he coming during a part of the day where there's like a lot of traffic? Is he coming in like in Uber? So every time he's in the Uber, there's something different. Is he it would be interesting to know like all of that information that we would really generally not have any clue about, what is happening prior to him
Right.
even getting here. Because if he's showing up agitated, that's probably not related to Game U. It's probably something that happened prior to, him even arriving.
And
So-
that, I don't know if you guys have access to prior webinars that we've done. You do, because you could find a lot more information about those setting events. You want to call that a setting event in our ABC. ABCs of behavior webinar. That would give a lot more information about looking at that. Yes, I'm to really looking at what that setting event, what those antecedents might be, so that it's not just the second that you're seeing the behavior happen.
So he had 2 quick comments about to answer your question about where Stephen is assuming. He says, I think he's being dropped off after work. I think he has a busy schedule and it's about 4 p.m.
Oh, so he's tired.
Yeah, he might need a little break, a little snack, something to eat, drink, just chill in a beanbag or
Or
a chair
it's
somewhere.
a really bad time for him to be taught something new.
Yeah.
So the break might be great and fix everything, or it could just be like, this is a really bad time of day for him to be in a class. So I think those are 2 things that we can probably investigate.
Mhm.
What was the other thing he said?
Well, he was saying maybe I can start with some more light activities to
Sure.
begin with, and try to use like a game controller instead
Sure.
of something else.
Absolutely. Oh, we called it a joystick. That's how much we don't know.
Yeah,
It is called joystick.
Okay.
I mean, it's a
in
lot of-
1983. it's
The
probably
Atari breakthrough, breakout, whatever.
I mean,
Okay.
arcade cabinets use joysticks.
We used to laugh. What did we have to build? Enemies and characters or whatever. We're like, what is that?
Oh yeah, my
Yeah.
thing is-
Yeah.
So we know very little about that.
We
kind of
know a
stuff.
lot about other
We know about
things,
this.
yes, but
we don't know about the
your
stuff you guys
world, not
actually
so
do.
much.
Yeah.
But it's universal what we talk. We talk about things that are
Yes.
universal.
Stephen says great answers, or he says good
Yay.
answers. He says thank
Oh,
We should have
You're
a radio-
welcome.
maybe a radio show.
radio show.
you. Okay. All right. We
Okay.
have 2 more questions.
Fabulous.
We have one from Anissa,
Hi, Anissa.
and she says, I have a student that has been working on a project for a considerable amount of time, a few months for as far as I know, but he is losing interest gradually.
He's been working on it for a couple of months.
Too long.
Is that what she said?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's,
Okay.
He's probably bored.
Uh-huh.
Okay, keep going with the question though.
He is a bit on the stubborn side and doesn't want to explore other programs that would
Mm.
help make doing tasks for his project easier, nor programs that would be used for later down the pipeline.
I'm going to put back in my suggestion that I
Yes.
used with Jess. Jess had great success.
Thank God for Jess.
I'm sorry, but it's a time of day that we get a little crazy too. I apologize for that unprofessional comment. But if there are things that she could start to teach him to make that experience better for him, then it might just be that he gets to be in whatever he wants to be in for a certain amount of time, and now it's time for her to teach him a new lesson, and he can go back to that. Because if he has a limited repertoire of skills and he can't move past it, then he's here to learn, I would
Yeah.
think, new skills. So on some level, she's got to be able to introduce those to him.
I also wonder how many times he comes. Like, is he like a once a week or a once a week?
for 3 hours.
So that's a
Yeah.
long session.
It is
wow.
a long session, 3
So
hours.
what if it's like you learn one thing new every session? So then it's also like a little tiny thing instead of, really pushing his frustration level, or like splitting up his session. So if it's really 3 hours, maybe it's like 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour, and maybe the first hour you teach something new, the second hour you teach something new, like figuring out something where you're not pushing him like totally out of his comfort zone, but it is your responsibility,
Right.
obviously, to teach him something new.
Mhm.
I also think staying on one thing for a very long period of time could in and of itself be problematic. One, he could be bored, but 2, for kids who have any kind of compulsive behavior, it's now been through, 2 or 3 months of practicing the same thing. We are now in their repetitive behavior. So now coming out of that is going to be much harder for them. So I don't know that that's an issue with this student or not. I'm just giving it to you as food for thought.
And the other thing that I thought about was at what point in this 3-hour session is the breakdown happening? At what point? Like, is it after the first hour he starts to show a little stubborn behavior and that sort of thing? Is it within the first 10 minutes? At what point? And if in fact she could start to identify what that point is, if she can get on the side of it before it's happening
That's right.
and try to switch things up a little bit, then you get to him before he reaches that that
Big
frustration tolerance.
Yeah.
I just want to interrupt for a quick second. We had some audience hand raising. I just wanted to be able to
I
catch
was-
that question
I was
out there
just,
in the audience.
Thank you. I'm the audience. I was just gonna suggest basically what you were saying. If there's a way to break up the 3-hour session, is that even just smaller bits, maybe alternate. Start with something a little bit something new, like 10 minutes or something, then go back to his project that he wants to do but doesn't really want to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I would-
something breaking it up.
Yeah, and I would use it like Julie said. I'd use a schedule. However you break
And
up the
that's
session, I'd
Actual
use a
breaks too,
schedule.
because 3 hours. I've done 3-hour-long sessions.
Yeah.
They want to break your brain.
Yes.
That's a
turns
lot-
into
a long
Yes, it is. So
time.
you might want to find out ahead of time. Really keep a close eye at what point he's really breaking down.
She did comment back to me. She was Nisa said, "I'm trying to get him interested in taking another step and start laying out some UVs, so basically putting the skin on a ship. But he's very keen on just modeling his ships. That's all he wants to do. He doesn't want to do anything past modeling his ships." And I mentioned, oh well, what you could do is possibly have one of his ships already colored, already like made for him, so that he could see what the end result would be.
Mhm.
And she said, "Oh, I could probably do a demo for him." She's been showing him other artists' work and how their ship looks after being textured
That's a
and
great
colored.
idea. See, I couldn't make that suggestion because I didn't know those sorts of things
yeah.
were possible.
What about,
He said, she also said, I'm so sorry. She also said he's very interested in seeing the finished product, but then he goes back and models more canon.
So you could use a rubric for him too,
Rubric. Okay.
right? So here are the things you need to do to get to. If you're super interested in this finished project, these are the things to get to this finished
Okay.
project, and then he might not want to do all of it, but maybe he'll say like, "I'll do this and this," and you fill in the rest. And then maybe the next time around he does 3 things and you do the rest. Like you can build
But you've
all
already
of that
found
up.
the carrot, the dangling
Yeah.
carrot. That thing he's going to go after is seeing the finished model. Yeah.
So that might be a way to get him a little bit more involved too.
also, what kind of program is she using? Because Paint 3D kind of combines both of those, and you start out painting it. I don't know if that translates to UVs at all, but it could give him an idea.
I believe she is teaching the student Blender. But I believe
Paint 3D involves a lot of the painting it instead of just modeling it.
Hmm,
So it's got a library, so the model is already there. So she might want to try that. I don't know. It's just an idea.
I know that's a viable idea. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Creative How high?
Oh, are we back?
Oh my God. I'm glad you guys are kind of low key.
She did say I could split up, unless you read that already.
No, I didn't.
I could split up his sessions. He's pretty focused when he's super interested, but I also think it may be time to do something fresh.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. And even if he is okay and seems one day better, just break it up anyway.
Yeah.
There's no harm in breaking it up, so you don't even run the risk of getting him to that because you don't know which day he's going to be okay and which day he's not. So just break it up.
Yeah, whatever you start doing, I would, like Julie said, I would do consistently. I would think also, like, personally and professionally, like, doesn't it make it more interesting for you guys as instructors if you broke up a session that was 3 hours long? I mean, I would think that would, after a while, like, coming into that 3rd hour, you'd be like, oh my God, the clock must be stopped. So I would think the more you're able to, like, make it interesting for you, the more it's going to be interesting to the student that you're working with.
Another thing that I have to mention is it's a 3-hour session, but he's also doubled up with someone for 2 hours.
Oh, nice.
So this instructor needs to go back and
Go
forth.
back and
with
forth.
Oh, okay. So it's not solid one-on-one
Right.
for 3 hours, which also makes
So that's good too. A rubric might be great for him because then he'll have to do some independent work.
right. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
that might be a nice skill for him to learn.
And maybe when he's in that dyad, and we talked about this, if a student does not have the skill set to do something new, which they really shouldn't during the dyad portion of their session, then when they are in one-on-one instruction with a teacher, that's the time where she introduces something new, and when he has to be independent, he can go ahead and
Sorry.
peel the skin off the model.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess. Sorry. I just read the comment. And apparently, those 2 students are doubled for 3 hours.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Oh my God, she's so busy.
Yeah.
Good for you.
But that could be the perfect time for him to understand that that's when he can
Do something.
do what he can do independently, but when he's with her, because
Learn
she
something
should be
new.
flipping back and forth between two students. When he's with her, she has a schedule that he should follow.
Oh,
The students do work pretty well together and bounce ideas off of each other.
which
Great.
they did a lot.
Yes.
Good.
All right. For now, we'll move on to the next question. So Cameron, he says, I have a double up session with two students that both require pretty constant prompting and very different interests. One of them actively dislikes being doubled up as he used to be a solo student, but has no way to move to another slot. Is there a way to alleviate this for the student outside of finding another session for him?
You're gonna have to. You have to repeat it.
Huh?
You have to repeat that.
Okay.
We zoned out for a minute.
That's okay.
Oh my God.
I have a double up session with a student that both require pretty constant prompting and very different interests. One of them actively dislikes
Actively
being,
dislikes what?
being doubled up, as
Oh.
he used to be a solo student, but now
What's a
But-
solar student?
but has no way to move to another slot now. Is there a way to alleviate this for the student outside of finding another session for him?
So they need to be in a dyad, is
They
what
need
you're saying.
Due to
Right.
scheduling?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
well,
this was our whole dyad training session.
yeah,
where we-
well, yes. I mean, I think it's gonna be hard, and these are adults.
Yes. Jersey.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, one I'm gonna say is you need to speak to your administrator, because I think that scheduling might be an issue for the student who doesn't want to be in the dyad, only because if the student who doesn't want to be in a dyad is engaging in behavior that could be disruptive or impeding the learning of the other person, that's going to be a non-behavioral issue and more of an administrative issue. However, as Julie was saying, as far as teaching to dyads, if the student doesn't want to be engaged in the dyad, I think you have to start from like square one and build a rapport between the other student. There is no saying that these two people are going to be friends, and I don't know what levels they're at. I don't know what their social skills are like or their levels of independence. But to some degree, they need to be paired. We don't all like the people that we work with, but unfortunately, that is just a fact of life. So they at least have to tolerate each other.
Does this student have any independent skill whatsoever? Are they able to work side by side with another student and actively participate, or do they need one-on-one instruction to produce anything? That's an important question.
I think because there's going to be a little bit of a delay and we're running a little bit
Okay.
short on time, we're going to move on to the next question, but I'll follow up with Cameron.
Okay, 'cause that's an
ask
important-
these
And
questions.
where is the student?
Piscataway.
Piscataway. Okay.
So Cecil asked a question. There's a student that gets mad easily. It usually starts out being mad at himself, but it then turns to hatred towards me. Every time he messes up, he would say, "Did I do something wrong?" And I would explain to him what he did. But that's okay, and I would explain to him what he did, and that's okay, and he's here at Game U to get better. Recently, he told me that it hurts his feelings when I call out his mistakes. Just like his art, he wants to be flawless and doesn't understand that everyone makes mistakes. What should I do?
So perfectionism is a trend we actually see a lot. And getting students to be able to overcome corrections is something that's not so easy. I mean, there are a few things. You can make an independent checklist. You can use a rubric. You can try to remove yourself to some degree when giving the feedback and make it objective, which may help with kids who are more perfectionistic. I know we've said rubric a lot tonight, which is kind of interesting. So I don't think we've ever talked about it that much. But for a student who feels that what you're saying is more of the problem than what they're completing or how they're performing, it takes you out of the equation and you're no longer the issue. However, for students who have any kind of underlying oppositional behavior in general, you're always going to be the problem. It's never going to be them. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is just don't take that personally at all. It's something that we all have to detach from to some degree, that it's not on us. That probably doesn't answer your question that well, though. I think if he's, before he shows any signs of like severe, like you said, anger, at that first onset of the change of behavior that you start to see, I would try to probably avoid talking about the mistake or the correction and just try to go in and calm him down. So anything that you think you could say to him to like take his mind off of it, be comforting, don't be judgmental of the work. If you can calm him down before the behavior escalates, then at some point you might be able to revisit the correction. But once he starts to get all worked up and he's showing any signs of anger or aggression, he's already at a point where he's tuned out everything that you've said. And you're not really going to make any headway at that point anyway. Do you have anything to add to
No,
that?
I don't.
It's a little,
Because it's
that's
really
a hard,
unavoidable on some level
Yeah.
is to have to take that feedback. So I think that being truthful feedback is important, but maybe there's a way to grade how honest the feedback is until this student is more capable of receiving feedback. Maybe you work towards some sort of very neutral language
Mhm.
and maybe work more towards a more honest, I don't want to say negative, but something that has more of a negative connotation. It's a hard one because it is
Yeah.
something
I'm
that
wondering if there's research out there about
we would have to look at it.
perfectionism.
Maybe chiming in again. Maybe an outside source, maybe you wouldn't take that quite so personally. Something you could look up, like you said, like a rubric, but
Mhm.
something, maybe a source he respects. I don't know if you could find that.
Yeah, like if he has to compare his work to something.
Come up with a set of objective standards.
Yes. Which is where we got to when we were talking about a rubric. Because
Yeah.
remember we said, is there a professional panel of people
Yeah.
that could, and then we said the Game U people are professional people in the industry who
Right.
would know, that sort of
what's
thing. Yeah.
expected or what skill needs to be completed. So I know that totally does not answer your question, but maybe we should look up a little bit more on how to like confront correction
The
and
perfectionism.
perfectionism, and
Okay.
we can get back to you. That was Cecil?
Yes.
Okay. Are you gonna write that down so I remember to do it?
Is there another document that you have right there? That we can
I
be-
was just copying things.
Okay.
Just
so
write it
we'll
on the
do-
bottom
okay.
and I'll write it. Because then we can Slack him a message if we find anything.
But I think for now, because I haven't seen any more questions at the moment, I think this might be a good place to
Okay.
end.
I gotta run.
Bye, Anna.
Thanks for coming.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for joining
Thank
the
you.
fourth ever workshop. And
ever.
yes,
Is it only
fourth
the
ever.
fourth?
Well, because our other one hasn't been filmed yet.
Okay.
Yes. But yeah, so thank you for joining in on us. Definitely leave a comment on YouTube just for us to know that you're still around and you're watching it. And hopefully you learned something new and important here. Of course you did. And we will talk to you soon.
Good night.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Awesome.
I'm sure that there's something.